what's the first thing you think of when you hear superhero?
Superman. Batman, all these guys.
For a while, I kind of liked Batman because he didn't have any superpowers. You know, he just, I think like from what I know, for most of his life, he really skilled himself to be. He really studied and worked out, and obviously had cool gadgets. Always like that. He was just, for me, he was different from other superheroes.
Spider-Man.
Spider-Man.
Spider-Man?
Yeah.
No, for me, it's for kids. For kids, but you don't really think of anything. What else do you think of?
Yeah, probably Superman.
Probably Superman.
Any reason why?
He seemed to be probably the most leading superhero, probably of them all.
Probably Spider-Man.
Why?
Well, he good suit. He's smart, and he's not one of those super powerful superheroes where he can do everything. He has weaknesses and things like that, and he's real. He has family problems and things like that.
You don't like Superman or Batman?
I like Batman, but I don't like Superman though.
Why not?
He's too powerful. I mean, they keep on having to bring people from all these other planets to try to fight him, and he still wins. And it's just it's redundant.
Where do you think comics stand right now?
Well, there are a lot of people who are bemoaning the fate of the industry. They say sales are down, and comics as an industry will be dead in 5-10 years. But people have said that throughout the history of comics in different stages.
I think they stand on the verge of a big transformation because clearly we can't keep going along the way we're going now because we keep selling fewer and fewer comics every year to a dwindling number of people, and they cost more and more every year, and that's just a reality of inflation and how much printing costs and stuff go. We've got to find some way of either cracking into the mass market or exploring ourselves out of the internet, and I think it's going to be both of those things. And what excites me about that is that where we've locked ourselves in the last 10-15 years is that it's all about superheroes, it's all that sells, it's all we can push. And comics can be about so much more than that.
Well, economically speaking, in the throes of a recovery, because at the end of the 90s, there was something called the speculator washout, where what actually happened in the early to mid-90s, where a lot of people were buying comics not because they cared about the stories or the characters, but because they thought them as investments. So suddenly, when they didn't, all the gimmicks, like all the special covers and the alternate issues and the cheesecake art, when all that stuff disappeared, a lot of these speculators disappeared too, and it took a lot of money out the industry. Then on top of that, the companies themselves were not producing things I would consider, most people didn't consider to be quality. So long-term fans were really, really, really disgusted by the whole gimmick wave. They were also really disgusted by how, I don't know, just how disrespectful the creative teams were toward the comic book line fandom, and so that really took a lot of money and a lot of spirit out of the industry, which they are recovering now, because right now I think that above all else, the writing and the art and the artistry itself, the quality, overall quality, is better than it's been in about 10 years. I mean, I will put that, I mean, I totally believe that, and the sad thing is it's really getting hard to get people to come back into stores now, because unfortunately most of the folks who are reading comics are guys who are in their 20s and 30s. There's not any teenagers and kids, and Marvel said they're going to start trying to target children again, which would be smart because that's their whole economic future right there. So right now things are pretty good creatively and artistically, particularly right now I should say, but nobody knows that, and that's the sad part, because so many people have been turned off that they're just not coming back.
It's got to kind of get with the times. It's got to figure out a way to sort of join the mainstream, not even the mainstream, but just figure out a way to reach more people.
If we can find a new audience, then they're going to be hungry for anything but superheroes, and then you'll see a real revolution.
There are a lot of comics out there that just do not deserve to be out there. They're so poorly done. I think that we need the artwork and the story to be top notch all the time. Get some fresh blood in there, I mean, get some new artists and get them to work with older artists, and learn things from them, and just check out different media. Like how comics are integrating with movies a lot now. With the X-Men movie and the new Tomb Raider movie. We're trying to get a back and forth thing going so that you can get that cinematic feel in a comic.
I don't think movies have anything to do with comics. Even when the really good movies come out, say, like the first Batman or the most recent X-Men, the effect on comic sales are pretty small.
In 1989, the Batman movie had a big impact, and all the sales of comics boomed for a while.
Batman was more of a generational phenomenon based on the fact that the kids who were growing up watching the Batman show on TV in the 1960s were now adults with small children thinking, oh yeah, Batman, and they brought their kids to the theater, and it was like cool and dark and a little different than they were used to, and that maybe occasionally brought them into the comic stores, but there's no real connection between people who go to the movies, see a movie, and then think, oh, I could go back to reading the comics again. The movies tend to be more about the little group that the culture, that where these come from, the comics people, thinking, oh yeah, now my comics will be worth more. And, having that proven not to be true, they get all discouraged and then leave, and so you end up using with more of a larger erosion. The X-Men did, for example, did absolutely nothing.
The X-Men, not a blink, not one ripple, not one bit. And it's because now it's even later than 1989. Now you can't, if you go see the X-Men, you might dig it, but if you go to find an X-Men comic, where are you going to find it? And if you find it, how can you understand it? It's just impenetrable, and it's not written for anybody who's a casual reader. And so we're not doing anything to maximize that. And plus, I guess the biggest part, though, is that you can't find these things anywhere. You got to know exactly where to look. And then you got to have to muster up the courage to go in there.
The X-Men film, I think what it did was show folks that you can tell a story that's socially relevant and using comic book characters without being campy. I think that opened a lot of people's eyes to the X-Men books, but they didn't necessarily pick up any. Like they might have came into a comic book store for the first time in their lives, or the first time in 10 years, and said, hey, that's cool, but put it right back down, and took off. I mean, it happened here a lot. There were lots of people who came in talking about X-Men, wanted t-shirts and things like that, but they didn't buy any comics. And nothing we could have done, like we would make them buy the comics. Like we would talk to them, we would like, show them, tell them what's great and all that, but it didn't work. So I think that it showed people that comic book movies can be taken seriously, but not necessarily the original art form.
But do you think that had any effect in the sales?
It didn't, no. And the guy who was the head of Marvel at the time, Bob Harris, was fired. One of the reasons he was fired was because he didn't translate the success of the X-Men film into success in the X-Men books.
People were blamed and people were fired, but the bottom line is that you can't really ride the coattails of a movie to make the comics usually better. That's not the way it works.
And it was really their fault because Marvel dropped the ball on that. DC, with the 1989 Batman film, they were giving away comics at the theaters. They made sure that theater owners gave away Batman and like other DC comics, so that like people walking out could like just have something to take back from the movies. In Japan they do it all the time, and here for whatever reason they just don't do it.
What about Spider-Man? That's going to come out next year.
Yeah, I think it's going to be the same thing. It's going to be exactly the same thing. It's going to be people thinking, oh, this is really cool. I remember when I was reading comics, Spider-Man comics in the 60s and that sort of thing. But again, it's more based on the nostalgia of the boomers and the sort of the just after the boomers. It isn't really going to do much for the industry. And I say this now, hoping that I'll be wrong. But I'm afraid I'm not.
I don't, for a minute, think it's going to drastically affect comic sales. I'm certainly not going to order a ton of books hoping that that's going to happen.
Yeah.
It never has.
Do you think the internet has any effect at all on the sale of comics?
I don't know if we have the time to explain all the different ways the internet has an effect.
The internet is kind of complicated, though, because the problem right now with the industry is not so much that people don't know about it, as much as it is that people have just forgotten about it. Which is to say that people have moved on. People think, oh yeah, comics, this is for kids.
The internet and like particularly video games, electronic gaming, and things of that nature have taken a lot of the audience away from the comic book industry. At a time when the industry was really, like I was talking about a few minutes ago, was really not at the top of its game itself. The younger kids got into video games, and they got into the internet, which promises them a lot more for the dollar. Because you give a kid $50 and send them into Electronics Boutique and come out with 2 games that can last them months. You come to $50 to a comic book store, you get like 10 or 20 comics that about like 10 minutes to read a piece. So you think of it in cost effectiveness, some of those new medias have really hurt comics.
There's one way where the internet has an effect is in how the dissemination of information, how a lot of my customers know about books and projects. Basically, when they've just been announced, people already know. Online reviewers, stores or publishers of websites, that information gets out. People know about stuff sometimes before I know when stuff is coming out.
The internet can be a useful tool in getting the word out, but it hasn't been. All it really does is spoil information for you. Like if there's a big plot secret, it spoils it. It spoils it for you could have found out the entire screenplay and the story of the X-Men film before, like months before it ever came out because of the internet. You can do it for Star Wars Episode 2 right now. In the 80s, that didn't exist. Like when you went to it there, you were pretty much blind unless you knew somebody who worked in the industry. Now you can be an insider just by logging on the net. And I think that kind of damages the integrity of it, because if you write a story and somebody knows the end of it before you do, what's the point?
I've asked a few people, when they hear the word superhero, like what's the first thing that comes to mind? And 3 basic people keep popping up,
Superman, Batman, Spider-Man?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I was just wondering if you have an idea of why that is.
Because Batman and Superman themselves, they're archetypical, right?
Wonder Woman technically would be an archetype too, but Superman clearly was the one from which everything else sprang. And Superman he's the purest form of superhero.
He's good, he's pure, and then Batman is the dark side of that, the self-made man. You could almost imagine you could become Batman if you were that obsessed and directed.
Batman, clearly, between the ubiquity of the merchandising in the 60s. Superman, apart from his iconic qualities, has been around pretty much the longest. And Spider-Man, because he appealed to the whole sort of boomer generation and had that sort of working for him.
It's like they're all a triptych of the human spirit. Superman's light, Batman's dark, and Spider-Man's everybody.
The thing that makes Superman a superhero to me, always did when I was a kid, is not that he can lift a car over his head. What makes him a hero is that he can do anything, and he chooses to do the right thing. He chooses to do the good with his powers. He chooses to follow the golden rule.
The Spider-Man has like the sort of the youthful qualities and the anti-hero aspects.
Because like Peter Parker, this guy's like a guy, he can't even pay his rent. Like his aunt's like almost about to die. He like starving. His uncle got shot because he didn't stop a guy. And like it's like Spider-Man's the guy everybody would be if they had the same powers. Because we have those same powers. Like the powers didn't enhance his life. They just made him worse in a lot of ways. Whereas Superman and Batman, but it's like they were all created in different times. But that's the reason why like Superman is like the greatest of all of us. What we can achieve. Batman is like the pain we all suffer, but still move forward. Because he lost his parents, and he took that instead of being like one type of lunatic, he becomes another type of lunatic. He becomes a good lunatic for the side of justice. Yeah. So I think that those are the reasons why. Because the thing is like they're so grand. Like Spider-Man is not as grand but Superman is like majestic. Batman is very majestic, like the way they're portrayed, and that really sticks with people because it's so easily identified. Like you can easily identify with both icons, Superman and Batman. And Spider-Man is more recent, because he's created in the '60s, so that's a different type of icon. But like, yeah, that's the reason why people always say those 3. Because they are everything. It's like everything about human achievement can be like summed up in those 3 characters.
Anything you want to throw in there about comics at all, on the whole? Not about superheroes in general, but just about, any comics you think people should be reading that they aren't, or anything you think is really cool.
There's a lot of good stuff out there. One of the bizarre things about the current market, although sales are down in a lot of cases, there is a greater wealth of variety and quality of material now, arguably, than there ever has been. So it's a very, very good time be a comics reader. There's a lot of really good stuff out there, so if people should basically have an open mind about, and if they get a little disenchanted with what they happen to be reading, there's plenty of other stuff out there that's good. And hopefully they can go to a store which can be also equally open-minded and suggest them books that would be appropriate. Different books for different folks.
All right.
Work.